Hey everyone, it's your friend and colleague Jesse Green. You're listening to another episode of the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's terrific to have your company as always. Today, I'm very excited to be speaking to Stephen Shearer, and Stephen has had an incredibly diverse career. He grew up in Buffalo, New York, and found his way to be the inaugural CEO of the ANZ branch of Facebook in that big tech company we all know and love. And over several years, he's had other roles at McKinsey. He's been the executive in residence at the AGSM, and now he's the CEO and MD of a wonderful company called Omniscient. And we're going to explore all things tech and how that might be affecting the world we live in and what that means for us in business. So firstly, Stephen, thanks for joining us all the way down from Sydney. How are you today, mate?
Great to be here. Thanks for making the opportunity. Let's get into it.
Oh, mate, I'm looking forward to this. Stephen, when you think about your career, I was doing some research, and I've got a lovely team that do some research on my behalf, and I've been doing my own on top of that. You've had quite a diverse career. I read somewhere you had something like 22 jobs or roles before you found your way to Facebook. And I think when you were hired at Facebook, you were the oldest person at Facebook, if that's correct. I'm trying to join the dots in that career trajectory, and it feels a little bit like there's a zig and a zag involved there. Can you walk us through some of that?
Yeah, I have been a zigger and a zagger. That's well characterized. The number you refer to is 22. I actually did a TED talk about this after I left Facebook.
Yeah,
and it was called The Oldest Guy at Facebook. The reason it was called that was, as you referred to, I was, in fact, I found this out later after I was hired, but I found out that I was the first person over 40 that Facebook had ever hired.
Wow.
Anywhere in the world. I was the oldest person the company had ever hired. And the average age when I joined Facebook was 23. So,
gosh.
There were 2,000 people in Facebook back in those days. Still a reasonably sized company. Facebook would have 100,000 people today, but of those 2,000, 23 was the average. Mark Zuckerberg was about 26. So I was 46 when I joined Facebook, and so I was double the age of the average employee. I was the age of their parents. It's like, imagine working with your father, right? I mean, it's great, but it doesn't feel quite the thing that you would do every day.
Yeah.
And so I was thrust into this situation where I really wasn't. I wouldn't say I wasn't prepared for it, but I don't think anybody would be prepared for it, because Facebook was at that moment where it was just hitting its kind of hyper growth, and it was just full of people, young people that were super smart, super ambitious. I mean, this was the classic Silicon Valley success story, really just getting off the launch pad. And so, at that moment when I joined, there was not a lot of respect inside Facebook for your degree or what university you went to or where you worked before. I mean, so many people at Facebook, it was their first job ever, including for Mark. And so I had a moment where I had to kind of rethink and remake myself as a leader. I had to reimagine how I was going to manage all these amazingly talented and ambitious people. And it was both confronting, but also, a really great moment for me to kind of reconsider who I was as a leader, almost as a person as well. Because I did have I wouldn't say I had a zigzaggy career, but I've had different phases to my career. If I had to break it into 3 chunks, the first chunk was kind of avoiding work. To be honest, when I was in my 20s, I really just traveled the world for a long time, trying to, just be that guy, kind of live the Instagram life before Instagram existed.
Yeah.
But then when I got to around 30, I already had an undergraduate degree, but I decided I needed to get a real job. So I wound up going to business school. I got an MBA, and then I wound up in the world of kind of big business, corporate, management consulting. And that was fine. But then in the 90s, you mentioned earlier, we were chatting, you mentioned the dot-com era. Well, I got very deeply involved in startups during the dot-com boom. So I left my corporate job and I started a couple of companies. I raised money in Silicon Valley. I made money, I lost money. And that went on for a few years. And then along came Facebook, and I joined them when they were still a small business. So, and then they grew into, obviously, the giant that we know today. And then since I've left Facebook, I've been deep in AI now for about 7 or 8 years. So, those, and ironically, I have no, technical background. I'm not a guy that ever was the coder sitting in my bedroom. That was never my style. So, yeah, I've been very lucky that I've had a very varied career, but at the same time, when I look back, I think my luck has largely been, I've made it happen by just taking risks, making hard decisions, putting myself first rather than putting, maybe the company first in many cases. I quit jobs that I didn't like. And I think being able to take those risks and make those moves is what really has led to my success anyway.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of things I'd like to explore there, Stephen, because I'm curious to talk about this dynamic of 23 versus 46, the age difference, it's double. And so Facebook would have had plenty of talent to draw upon. I'm curious to ask, if you were the oldest person and the only person over 40, what was it that they were looking for that they felt you possessed that they didn't see in others on the team? What was the skill set that you brought to Facebook? And my second question, my follow-up question to that is, by your own definition or admission there, you're not a technical guy, you're not a coder, you're not sitting there. How do you manage a group of people that have expertise that you don't have and lead that team and maintain the respect of that team when there's a skills difference that you have? That obviously you've got skills that they don't have, I acknowledge, but how did that dynamic work?
So, great question. So first, when I got to Facebook, I went through I think it was about 16 interviews before they hired me, right? And Facebook came after me. I didn't approach them. And they were hiring lots of people. If you've seen the movie The Social Network, that was what Facebook kind of was back in the day. It was like a frat party. I'm being extreme here, but it wasn't a business, right? It didn't have really business leaders in there. And there is something to be said about experience and business leaders. So Sheryl Sandberg got hired. She started to bring in some folks, including many ex-Google people.
Yes.
So I came in that wave. I was not ex-Google. I was running my own startup, but I came in that wave. And this was sort of the adults being brought in. I just happened to be one of the older of the adults that was brought in. And my role at Facebook wasn't to run the technical side of the business. It was on the monetization side, so the commercial side. Facebook, even today, makes all its money out of advertising. So I built the ad sales business, and my role was here in Asia Pacific to help build that business here from scratch, where Facebook had nothing here, and we built it from scratch into a multi-billion-dollar business. And so I think the way I dealt with that was two things. And if you want to watch my TED Talk, please do. I'll get my view counts up. But my TED Talk goes into it a bit. But there was a few things that I had to do differently. So one was I realized I didn't understand how things worked at Facebook. I didn't understand how everybody can open up the app and see how this is how the app works, the user interface. But how did things work behind that? How did it get made? How did the business make decisions? What was the technology that sat behind it all? What were the business processes? Who did what? And so I had a very simple way of figuring this out. And it was very chaotic in the early days. When I joined Facebook, it was like a shit show, really. It was very, it was hard to understand how anything worked. Facebook wasn't good at org charts or job descriptions. None of that existed.
Yeah.
Right? So I went around and with over 100 people all over Facebook, I just sat down and I asked one question. I just said, just teach me how to do your job.
Yeah.
How do you do your job? And I did this so many times that eventually Mark Zuckerberg, he heard about it, and he'd sat with me for like 2 hours, and he took me through how he did his job. And the reason, and I think this is really powerful, I use it today, most people don't really understand what happens in their companies, and you don't understand what people do. And it is incredibly enlightening, and it's incredibly humbling to go around and really see the expertise that's in your organization.
Yes.
Number two is it builds a network, particularly in a big company and like Facebook, where I had a network of people that I knew for years after that, and simply because I went through this exercise. And the third thing was it really gave me a credibility with these 23-year-olds. This is one of the reasons I could build my credibility. I was really keen to think about, how do I build credibility with people that are super skeptical of me? And so I thought the best way to do it was utter humility, where I literally admit, I don't know what I'm doing. I certainly don't understand what you do. So can you teach me that? And I think that insight was incredibly powerful, because if you can turn the people around you into your teachers, you become the smartest person in the whole organization. I probably understood how Facebook, at that point in time, I probably understood how Facebook worked better than anybody, and even Mark. And so that was my way of, now I wouldn't be an expert on everything, but I became I had a little knowledge about a lot of parts of how Facebook actually operated and what happened. And that was, that was just an idea I came up with that turned out to be probably the number one reason I became successful in the early days. And I got over that credibility hump with so many people at Facebook. This isn't probably just unique to Facebook. A lot of companies are like this. When you come in the door, the first, you get hired by this great company, you're all excited, that first week, you can't wait to be part of it all. Like, you can't believe you're there. But then you come back and see that person 6 months later, or a few months later, or a few weeks later, and they're just utterly depressed, because they're like, oh my God, we called it the valley of despair that everybody hit at Facebook. You'd realize there's all these amazing people here, and I have no idea what I'm doing, and I have no idea how I can have impact. So I short-circuited that a little bit. I did go through that valley for a little while, but I did something about it, which was, tell me how to do your job. And so I don't think I'm natively the most humble person in the world. I actually think I've got a pretty healthy ego, but I think I know how to turn it off at certain times. And the second part of your question was, like, managing teams or working with teams with technical expertise that I don't have. I think that humility still serves me really well. Humility and curiosity. Like, I don't have all the answers, and I really want to learn, and I want you to be my teacher. And so that dynamic, I think, is one of the reasons I've been able to do a lot of things I've done. However, I would offer that I don't think everybody who's worked for me or I've worked with thinks I'm a great leader. I think I've received plenty of criticism along the way, and I try to learn from that. Right, I try to build and get better. But I think that's part of the way I've succeeded thus far.
But there's a real vulnerability to that, isn't there? Because you could have easily come in, with your sheriff's badge on, so to speak, and I'm the manager, or I'm the whatever I am in this particular role, and then you would have alienated people, I'd imagine, pretty quickly if you'd taken that approach, compared to the curiosity and the humility, which combined, I think, creates a bit of a vulnerability in it, but in a really nice way. I think it's really clever.
I've had, in my career, I've had some really bad bosses, I think.
Yeah.
And I never had a bad boss at Facebook. I've got to say, I had great bosses. But previous to Facebook, I had some terrible bosses. And this was back in kind of the old days. I mean, I've been in business long enough to remember the 80s and 90s when, on Friday afternoon at 4:30, you got to unbutton your top button and loosen your tie. That was like, that was the casual, policy. There was none of this, hey, I got to go to my Pilates class. No, people worked. Your boss was ruled with an iron fist.
Yeah, tyrant.
And I had some bad bosses that I just didn't respond to. I didn't think they were good leaders. And the big thing that all of them, in retrospect, that all of them lacked was this curiosity, humility, empathy. They didn't have that. And it didn't work for me. Maybe that their style of leadership worked for others, and they were successful in their career. There's many ways to lead. But for me, the lack of those three things, curiosity, humility, and empathy, just made me not responsive to them. And I wound up, just not responding to their leadership. And, those companies I wound up leaving. And I think I carried that with me. And when I got to Facebook, I realized this is a real leadership opportunity for me to try to be the leader, or try to not be the leader that I didn't want to be, the bad examples I'd seen before,
sure.
to really shape myself. And I was luckily in the right environment where those sorts of characteristics were really valued at Facebook. Like that, some companies don't value humility, curiosity, and empathy in their leaders. They don't reward it. They pay for results, or they pay for being a hard manager, a hard leader. I mean, I think you've got to be soft and hard. But and Facebook was no, it was no cakewalk. I mean, there were very high expectations. My wife worked at Apple and Amazon. I have friends at Google. And these companies are very, you're not just sitting around. I mean, you are working hard, ambitious targets and goals. If you don't hit them, you're out. Like, it's a really high performance culture. But there is also this ability to have more, I think, more nuanced leaders, and to develop more nuanced leaders that are much more in tune with the culture that those companies are trying to create. So yeah, it was a good opportunity for me to kind of recreate myself. And I think it was really healthy. I was really lucky to have that confronting moment where I could rethink everything about what kind of leader I wanted to be.
Yeah, well, Facebook's not really known for its empathy these days. To be honest, it's not. When you hear the word Facebook or Meta or whatever, empathy is not usually the word that comes to mind. And you obviously left Facebook, and I know since that time I don't want to use the word critic of Facebook, but you've made some comments and observations about Facebook that some might describe as, calling out some behavior that needed to be called out. I wanted to ask you a little bit about how a company can lose its way, because the tech companies, these social media platforms, they are very powerful companies. My personal perspective is there's an abuse of that power from time to time. There's an avoidance of accountability. There's an avoidance of responsibility. I wanted to get your take on, what you see as Facebook's particular failings, but equally, what are the lessons around hubris? What are the lessons around absolute power? What are those things that you've observed, and what are the leadership lessons from that people listening to this podcast might take away?
This is a great topic, and I really I commend you for going deeper into it, because interesting. I love what you just said there. Facebook isn't known for empathy today. It's amazing how a brand can change so fast. I can remember when I worked at Facebook, and I left Facebook in 2018. But back in the in the early days of Facebook, 2010, 2011, 2012. I mean, people, if they found out I worked for Facebook, some of them would burst into tears. They were so happy. It was amazing. I can still remember moments where, people were like hugging me, and it was just, it was crazy. I worked for a beer company once, and I never got that reaction for making beer. But you would get these amazing reactions, and inside of Facebook there was a almost utopian belief that we're building this future that is going to, democratize information and bring, help democracy rise up, and break down borders, and all these great utopian ideas that Facebook had, which I think the company still, to a large extent, has baked in. But as we've seen, the negative side effects or externalities, or whatever you want to call them, of the internet in general and of social media in particular, have become undeniable. We can't wish them away. We can't, and even the companies themselves they can't credibly deny the problems that we're seeing come from social media. Now, has Facebook, let's just zero in on them, has Meta, and I always call them Facebook, but it is now Meta. I left before it was Meta. But has Meta done well at dealing with? I think yes and no. I know internally in the company there was a lot of this. I wasn't in every room where everything was decided. I was just a worker bee in a bigger machine. But I know that the debates that I did hear or was part of were quite thoughtful about what's the right thing to do. How do we control this? But what became apparent to me, and then became apparent particularly actually after I left, was that social media was something that is of such power that even Facebook can't control it, right? Yeah. Even it's like the scientists in the desert in the movie Oppenheimer, when they press the button and the atomic bomb explodes. Those scientists realize we can't control what we just created. Yeah. And I think if you scratch a little deeper with Mark Zuckerberg and others, if you could get inside their id, they would admit we can't control what we've created. And that's a very unpleasant place for them to be. And I don't think Mark and others like admitting it, but I think that's true. I think a second challenge with, if I just go to Meta for a minute, and I have been public about not my criticisms, but just ways I think we should think about social media and its effects. Which, and I think this debate and this discussion is great. I don't have all the answers, and I think people should have opinions. But I think one of the problems with Facebook is that there's, as you mentioned, it seems like there's not a lot of accountability, et cetera. And I think there's not. And there's one reason for that, is that Mark Zuckerberg has no boss other than himself.
Yeah.
So Mark has super voting shares. He controls the board. He cannot be fired. He can't be disciplined by his board. His board is a puppet of Mark. And look, that could be okay with certain startups. I get it. This is not an uncommon structure in Silicon Valley for some companies. But when you're of the scale and power of Facebook and the global power as well, the cross-border power, having one guy who controls everything really does. Mark controls that business, and look, he has investors and shareholders that have some say. Like this, if the share price goes down, maybe Mark has to respond, but he can't be fired. And I've noticed that when things have gone wrong in Facebook, and I've seen big things go wrong since I've left, as many of us have. And I know I'm not inside of Facebook anymore, but nobody gets fired. The people who were responsible or the things that went wrong, nobody loses their job, right? And the ultimate sanction, I think, for in capitalism and to kind of do the right thing is actually you lose your job. You actually aren't employed anymore. And that just never happens at Meta. And so I think there's an insularity there where, hey, we can do big things, we'll do good things, bad things will happen, but ultimately we're so rich, I'm so powerful, I control this, and I have a bubble of people around me that I will not punish if something goes wrong, that is what keeps the business in the kind of bad zone that it is. And I think if there was one change I'd make to Facebook Meta, just one, I would remove Mark's super voting shares so that he could actually be outvoted and have a real board. And so, Mark controls, I don't know what a number is, let's say 5% of Facebook's, share capital, but he controls, 75% of the voting shares. Well, you take away the 75%, make it 5%, and then see what happens. And I think that would bring more accountability to Meta. Would that fix everything? But no. But if that's one thing I would change, that would be it, because I think there is this presumption of power that is now coming from a lot of folks like that sit on the top of these companies. That doesn't mean these people are bad. I think Mark's actually a good person, but I just think he has too much power over something that he can't fully control, and I think that leaves the world in a lesser place.
So what are the leadership lessons, do you think, for the everyday business owner listening to that? Obviously, you're having a sounding board, having people who will not just be an echo chamber, but rather people that will, I suppose, tell you very candidly what they think and feel about a given situation. But beyond that, what are the lessons here for business owners, do you think?
I would say there's three things we could take from this. So I think one is, powerful as you might be in your world, having checks on that power or check-ins on that power, I think is healthy for you as a leader. Yeah. And so I think you need, it's like, if you're a boxer, you can spar with your sparring partner who's never going to hit you, that hard. But once you get in the ring, you're going to get hit hard. And I think as a leader, you need to get beyond the sparring partner. You need to get in the ring, and you need to have somebody be able to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do it that way. Maybe you should do it this way. There's some accountability actually is healthy for you as a leader. So I think that's one. I think two is where you're getting information from and how you're, points of view that you're getting. I think you've got to have a wide aperture there and try to build, points of view from different people. I'm pretty good at asking people from a wide variety of areas what I should do or how I should do it or learn. So I think that's the second thing. And I think the third is taking accountability for failure and really owning it. And look, there's different perceptions of what owning it means, but I think that's really important in order to build the credibility you need to then be able to speak with some moral authority on another issue. Like if we all know leaders like this who don't take accountability. We've all seen them, political leaders or business leaders, and you know that their credibility is undermined by the fact that they don't take that accountability.
Yeah.
So I think those are three things that we can learn. It's just any business you run today.
I have a deeper question I want to ask you about not being able to control things, because that kind of leads into an AI conversation, really. It feels a little bit like the AI genie's out of the bottle, and can we fully control that? I know before he passed away, Stephen Hawking's had some concerns about, AI basically running away with things and us as humans creating something that we can't control. I wanted to ask you your thoughts around that element of AI. And I also wanted to, because you've been in this world, quite a while, I wanted to also ask your thoughts around, I guess, the pace of change. And we're talking a little off air about the dot-com boom and bust, and when the internet really kind of was really gathering ahead of steam. I remember those days, and it was like the new economy and the old rules don't apply, and it was market caps of ridiculous amounts of money, and all of a sudden it imploded, and it turns out the rules do still apply. And there was a shakeout, and out of that shakeout came companies like Amazon or Google or whomever. I wanted to get your thoughts on the current landscape of the AI, I suppose, arena, because it feels to me that there's this endless chase to keep up with the latest technology. And if you're not on board, if you're not up with it, you're going to be left behind. Your competitors will overtake you. But it is almost impossible for the average business owner to try and keep pace with these things. And is there a reckoning coming? Will there be a shakeout? Will all these current companies be around in 2, 3, 5 years? What do you see happening there?
I don't have a better answer than anyone else necessarily. None of us can see the future. And I've heard, and I've, like others, I know experts in this space who are more expert than me, and they will diverge radically on this. One says there's a jobs apocalypse. The other says no, it's going to create jobs, and even that can come out of the mouth of the same person. 6 months apart, right?
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of mixed signals right now. And then there was a lot in the questions you just asked, so I'll unpack a couple of things I think are really might be useful to think about. So one is this pace of change thing. So if you're a business owner, as I run a small business, which we can talk about, but essentially I run a small company today, and AI has become really, I believe, critical to how I succeed in running this business going forward. So not necessarily the products I'm building, and the product we build is AI, but forget about that for a minute. Just how we do business, how we get things done, how we make the sausage, I think is going to radically change because of this new technology. Now, this is my year. Funny thing is, last year, in fact, the last 2 years, I actually told my company and my leaders, I said, we don't need to worry about AI in 2024. We don't need to worry about it in 2025 internally. But come 2026, I said, we're going to get cracking. That's going to be our year of AI transformation. And we started earlier this year. And so it has been. We have been really reimagining how we can build our company into the future. And I say to my business, I want to build an AI native business that's purpose-built for 2035, not a 1995 business that we just kind of retrofit, with a little new technology. Now, that's exciting, but at the same time, it's a little overwhelming, even for me.
Yeah.
We like which platform, which tool, how do we use it? There's 1,000 different use cases now bubbling up. How do I make sense of it? How do I maximize it? And my philosophy has been incremental, not revolution. So I'm not saying to my team, everything's got to change overnight. I'm saying we need to crawl, walk, run, and then get on the rocket ship. So crawling is around getting familiar with the tools, understanding what they can and can't do, understanding the where they're at today, finding, to use the jargon, finding use cases in the company where it can be really valuable and everybody can kind of get it and go, wow, okay, I get the AI used in that way is really helping us. So that's kind of crawling. Then, walking is going to be, okay, now we're gonna systematize this. We're going to train people how to use AI, and we're going to try to, standardize the platforms and the tools that we use as almost like coworkers. We'll have AI tools that are always there, always on, always working. That's kind of walking. And then running is going to be, I'm starting to reimagine, could I build a company with, formerly I might have needed 500 people. Now can I build that same company with 100 people?
Yeah.
And, and therefore, how does that change how I hire, the skills I look for, how I train people, the types of roles that even exist in my business, some jobs I think are kind of going away and they're being, reconfigured in a different way. So, but I don't think I'm there yet at running because I haven't gotten through crawl and walk yet.
Yeah.
And humans, we take a while to learn new skills, to get familiar with new stuff. So I see 2026 as my kind of crawl and walk year. And then 2027 is probably going to be a little more walking. And then maybe we start to figure out the run phase, kind of 12 to 18 months from now. And I'm lucky in my business now because I'm growing. My revenue's growing. I'm penetrating new markets, et cetera. So I don't have a legacy business I have to shrink. I have a small business that I can grow into this new model. But I think if you have a legacy business that's already there, it's a different challenge, which is you probably need to kind of, to want a better word, you need to shrink that business in a way using this. And then I think it's harder because you've got to work out, what people don't I need and, who should I let go? And I think those decisions are coming. And I think that is going to be its own difficulty. So I'm lucky I'm not in that position, but I think that most companies are in that position.
Yeah.
And so coming back to your original point about the pace of change, I think that decision about kind of, if you have 100 employees or 50 employees, who can I live without in the world of AI? I think those decisions are coming soon and within the next 18 months. And that's a difficult human moment for a lot of companies. And I think we're all going to be, I think the economy will be a challenge, but I think, and those people will be challenged, but I think us as leaders, it's a huge decision to say, who can I live without? And those decisions are now coming for many of us in leadership positions.
Yeah. I think it's going to be really, really fascinating. It just feels like my world is full of new AI things promising endless, upside, and if you're not on this thing, you're behind. And it's quite emotionally draining, to be candid with you, Stephen. It's like, oh my God, I feel like I'm on a hamster wheel that's just getting faster and faster and faster.
Well, if you're in social media, as many of us are, and you're, and you're interested in AI, guess what? Social media will be flooded with
exactly
stuff about AI and business and what you should be using. And I feel overwhelmed too. I've tried to become more intentional about how I think about this technology. So I try not to be, chasing, shiny things. I try to think, okay, let me just get deep and understand Claude. We're using Claude and Claude Code and Claude Cowork. And just trying to figure that out. Like I park everything else. I don't want to think about anything else. Let's just think about that for the next few months and get my head around that. So it is a fire hose right now. And
yes.
You mentioned before, like I think you alluded, some people think this is a bubble. Is this the same as the .com thing? And I'm pretty close to it. Many people aren't. I mean, if you look at the statistics, it's like, only 7% of people or something like that have actually used an AI chatbot. It's actually pretty small today. It's growing. It's not everybody. More people have not used AI, or at least think they haven't used AI. AI is kind of in everything, but more people have not used it than have used it at this point. So I get it. There's a lot of people that are still saying, I haven't touched this technology. What my advice to them, if they're listening, is just go to ChatGPT or Claude or something, and it's free, and just start playing with it. Just literally the chat interface, and you start your mind starts to expand. You kind of go, wow, like this is pretty cool, and there's amazing. You start to alight on new things it can do, and that starts to get almost overwhelming unto itself because I spend. I'm not unique in this regard. I think a lot of people like this. I spend a lot of time on AI today with AI, just using it almost as a thought partner on things. Like if I have an idea or I have a question, I will always be like, let me ask Claude and see what Claude says, just to kind of test my thinking. And that's really good. But on the other hand, it's also, you can quickly go down Claude rabbit holes or Gemini rabbit holes or whatever.
Yeah.
Where, hey, write me a report. Yeah, I'm really interested in this. Generate a report for me, and bang, there's a 20-slide deck that's just produces. And like, oh shit, now I got to read that thing. It's like I miss the old days when it would have taken a week for somebody to produce that report. Now it can be in my face in seconds after I asked for it, and that's its own challenge now. So it's almost information overload that I'm getting. And ultimately, you still have to make a decision. You still have to move forward. You still have to get shit done. You can't be talking to Claude all day about stuff. You got to go and make things happen. Now, Claude can help. These platforms can also make things happen, but they've got to be the right things. And so I do feel like there's this moment of like, you might be experiencing the same thing. I'll ask one of my teams. It's prepare a. I've got this question. Can you prepare a point of view on it, or bring something to a meeting? They will go to Claude, and they will ask Claude the question I asked. Claude will produce the 12 slides. That person will then send me the 12 slides, and my first thing I'll do is I'll get on the phone or I'll talk to them and I'll say, "Okay, tell me what's in the deck," and they'll be like, "I don't know. I just gave it to Claude," and I'm like, "That's not why I'm paying you."
Yeah. There's no value add to that, right? It's just, you could have
done no value
add.
add.
Yeah, you could have done that yourself.
And I think all of us need to think through what's our value add as a human as in these equations. And then that's its own challenge as well. It's like, okay, now I got to figure that out. And I haven't fully figured that out for myself yet, but that's my kind of task over the next 18 months is to figure out, okay, what's my role as a leader when Claude can do all these other things? Why am I here? And how am I adding the next level of value?
It's a really interesting question. Just for fun fact, my Claude I've named Santa Claude. I know it's very lame, but it kind of works. I imagine, a benevolent old dude with a beard, dispensing wisdom. Anyway, that's my version of Claude.
Good.
Whatever
works for you.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, but I wanted to shift gear for a second because you are doing a lot of work with Omniscient in brain mapping, and I think this is going to be really interesting. And I don't understand enough about the work that Omniscient does to have a great handle on things. But in my mind, I'm thinking that if you can map that brain, you can understand, what neurons fire under certain circumstances and all those sorts of things. That's going to lead to hopefully breakthroughs in the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases, maybe some mental health conditions, all those sorts of things. I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you see the future of health with these new technologies, and is it becoming, as we hear about, personalized healthcare, is that kind of where we're going, or is it just a deeper understanding more generally?
So what we do is use AI to look at the brain and to decode the signal in the brain in a way that can make sense for answering a question that's relevant for that brain. Now, the field we build in, there's a name for this. So using AI to decode brain signal, there's a name for it. It's called connectomics. And this is it used to be a niche field of computational neuroscience. And you've heard of other omicses, genomics, macrobiomics. Omics is the use of big data and AI to look at systems of the human body. So there is something called connectomics, and it's using AI to look at the connections of the human brain. And so the body is incredibly complex. Your brain is the human brain is the most complex thing in the universe. There's nothing more complicated than the human brain. That's why we are the most intelligent things in the universe. The only way to understand the brain is AI. It's really the only way. So our technology is founded on work that was done at places like Harvard and Oxford over the past, say, 20 years. There was actually something called the Human Connectome Project. You remember the Human Genome Project? There was something called the Human Connectome Project. And it was like all this fundamental work was done to try to build the first maps and atlases of the brain, to look at the brain as a data processor. And just to simplify in the world of medicine, and I'm not a doctor, so sometimes I say things that don't make any sense, but I simplify. If you're a cardiologist, you look at the human heart, it's relatively simple. It's a muscle. Boom, 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 boom. I'm being oversimplifying. But its function and its structure are like the same thing. It pumps blood, pretty easy to understand. But the brain, completely different. There's very little connection between its structure and function, because the function's invisible. You can't look at the brain and see, oh, there you're thinking about this, or there's your memory, or there's your emotions. It's not how it works. Your brain is a series of networks. They're incredibly complex. There's billions of connections and billions of synapses firing every second. Literally trillions of parameters in your brain. And so to make sense of that, you need AI. So what we do is we take a standard MRI. MRIs are been around for 20 or 30 years. The data you can acquire from an MRI is quite rich. We use that data to not build an image of the brain. We build a data map of the brain. We show how the information's moving around. And then if you assemble enough of those brains, you can start to look for patterns that then become repeatable, where you can then identify in a brain not just where networks are located, but you can understand how well they're functioning and how different circuits in your brain, an individual brain, are functioning compared to a healthy brain, a normal brain. And that then leads you down the path of things like being able to diagnose and identify symptoms of mental illness or neurodegeneration or other brain diseases. And so what we do is we built a platform that is useful for what we call the problems of the brain, and that's the world of medicine, and also the potential of the brain, which are things like learning and development or intelligence augmentation, or even the brain-computer interface technology. So we kind of have fingers in multiple pies across that spectrum. Probably the biggest area that we are in today is for neurosurgery. So our first products, which are FDA approved, we are commercializing in the US. They're used for brain surgery, and it's like a really obvious use case for connectomics, because a brain surgeon, let's say you have a brain tumor, that surgeon needs to go and deal with that tumor. Often they're going to resect that tumor. They're going to cut it out. Literally, they need to go through your skull and get at the brain. Well, when they do that, they're going to cut through healthy brain or damage healthy brain to get to the tumor and deal with the tumor. And what they want to do is minimize the damage that they do. And so a map that's super accurate about where the networks are located and how to avoid what's the safest path is incredibly useful for neurosurgeons. Mm-hmm. So that's our first product. It's going really well in the US, and we're being used at some of the biggest and most prestigious hospitals in America. But we don't stop there. We've got products now, applications for stroke, for epilepsy, for mental illness. We work with Neuralink, which is Elon Musk's BC, brain-computer interface company, because they have a problem where they need precision, and we're the experts in brain precision. If they're going to implant a device into your head, they need to know exactly where to put the electrode. So we build the maps that allow them to place that device precisely. So we think of ourselves as almost an operating system for what we would call like the brain data future, the brain data economy. And I think the next, all the hype now is around large language models and, building these tools. Well, we build large brain models. And I think the world of AI is going to shift, is going to shift from large language over to brain. And that is the much richer and more important data sources in the world. And they're the ones that I think are going to make humanity a better place. Because if we're ever going to eliminate things like mental illness from the face of the earth, it's going to be through the power of AI and the power of the kind of tools that we have built. So we have our big, hairy, audacious goal. Our mission is to improve the brains of billions through connectomics and AI, and eventually to eliminate things like neurodegeneration and mental illness from the face of the earth, so that we are I'm hoping within my lifetime, people having mental illness or Alzheimer's would be as rare as having polio or something today. It's literally it's almost been consigned to the past. So that's what we do. We've been pretty quiet in terms of our profile here in Australia, even though we're an Australian-born company. I live in Sydney. All of our commercial activities in the U.S., but things are going really well. We've raised about 100 million in venture capital, and we're probably, I would argue in the world of brain medicine and precision, our technology is probably the biggest thing to happen in 30 years, and I think it's birthing a whole. You mentioned precision medicine. Our technology is birthing a whole precision brain medicine field around it, which is bringing in neurosurgeons, neurologists, psychiatrists, radiologists. Like there's a whole movement now building around our technology. So it's not just us. We need the world of medicine to work with us to make this happen. So yeah, so that's what I've done since I left Facebook, and I'm hoping I can leave a better. I was proud of the work I did at Facebook, but I want to leave an even more positive impact on the world by the time I leave this planet, and I'm hoping through my company Omniscient, we're going to do that.
Well, I think that there's a lot of incredible work there, and I can't help but make the point, and a little bit of irony here. We may need to edit this out, but Facebook has done so much to create mental illness, and now Omniscient is there to fix it. So
well,
I shouldn't joke about it, but anyway, there's a little delightful irony there.
Yeah. Look. I understand that irony, and that's part of the reason why I built this company.
Yeah,
it's not the only reason, but I am like many ex-Facebook people. I'm not the only one. I have mixed feelings about the product and the platform that we built. It's funny, you will see a lot of ex-Facebook, even people who work at Meta today. I mean, they may not say this, but they won't let their kids on social media. Like they will. I know plenty. And I know plenty of people like me. I'm pretty much off of social media completely. I deleted Facebook a long time ago. I deleted Instagram. I deleted TikTok. I dip in occasionally because you can't live in this world without being part of it. But I'm very conscious about how I spend my time, and I think there's no question social media now with the addition of AI is very good at taking your time. Forget it for the moment, just park the other problems it can cause, but just being a time suck.
Oh, it's huge.
And I just feel like my time is just too precious, too important. My life, my business, my family, all these things are too important for me to just be endlessly doom scrolling. And that doom scrolling is so easy to do. It depresses me. And this is somebody who helped build Facebook, but when I'm on the bus or if I'm in a public place, just people just staring at their phones. It's just something sad about it. Like I'm old enough to remember when you got on the bus, people would read the newspaper, chatting to the person next to them, looking out the window, like reading a book. But now everyone's on their phone in their own silo, and that's just not there's a lot of good things that come out of social media. Absolutely. But that is something that it just doesn't. I'm not proud of it, and I want to leave a bigger, a better legacy behind me when I'm done.
Yeah, Stephen, that irony comment I made was not meant as a jibe. I don't mean it that way at all. I think it's wonderful the work you're doing, and whether Facebook existed or didn't exist, there would still be these problems to solve, and Omniscient is at the forefront of that. So that's wonderful. I want to thank you so much for sharing with us today your wisdom, your experience, your lessons, letting us know a bit about the zigs and the zags that have shaped your life and career. And I really appreciate the perspective of someone who's on the inside of it, because when you're saying with AI, we're learning to walk, we're crawling and walking, I think that gives a lot of comfort to the rest of us who feel overwhelmed, behind, whatever. So when I hear you say that, and I know our audience will feel the same way, it's comforting because you realize, okay, I'm not the laggard. I'm not the guy who's 10 years behind everyone else. It's just a process that we're all going through. So again, thank you on a personal level for putting my mind at ease at that. And I know our audience will feel the same. But again, mate, thanks so much for your time today. You've been really generous.
My pleasure. Great being here, and everybody, I hope have a great day, and I'll see you on the other side.
Thanks, Stephen. Take care, mate.
Hey everyone, it's Jesse here. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the podcast. If you're looking for some more tools, some more insights, some more inspiration to help you create a practice that you love, as well as a life that you love, well, head across to savvydentist.com and check out all the goodies that we have there waiting for you right now.